So, welcome to this episode of the podcast where I'm joined by a very special guest, the wonderful, the intelligent, the successful, and my sister-in-law, Gina Esposito. Welcome, Gina.
Hello, Mr. Mitchell.
Welcome to the show. This is, I should give you a proper intro, right? So people listening to this podcast probably have no idea who you are, because typically I'm talking to people who are either in the fitness industry, some business mentors, stuff like that. And you're a little bit out of left field as a guest because you are a very successful wedding photographer. You're, I would like to say, like one of the best in the world. If you read the Harper's Bazaar or whatever the magazine's called, The Brides, you're up there, right? You're with the best of them, the celebs and the high net worth individuals. You are shooting their weddings, right? Have I got that right? Am I doing you a disservice with that introduction?
No, I will humbly say that you are doing service to my 20-year career. So I appreciate that.
So the reason why I brought you on as this bit of a left field guest is because typically what people hear from people that I talk to, not in a bad way, but it's kind of like the same sort of stories, the same sort of things happen to these people. They've lived the same sort of journey. Yours is completely different. And I think you'll be able to bring a real different perspective to entrepreneurship, building a business, social media, all of that sort of stuff. Plus, I think that you have obviously direct experience working with people who have a lot of money and then will pay for services and things that are to the average person quite expensive. And there must be a different mentality with going about building a business that caters to those people. And a lot of people probably aren't selling anything to the level that you are, but again, they want to appeal to people who have more money because they feel like there's something in that. So we'll explore some of the stuff around that. But now, I confess, I don't necessarily know like your actual like story from where you started to like where you are now, like your 20-year career. I know, roughly speaking. I'm writing saying that I'm going to get the little town wrong. Sayville? Is it Sayville? You had a small studio in Sayville?
Yes. Good job, brother.
Yeah. I pay attention sometimes. Ask Maria, she'll say you don't. I don't, but... So you had a small studio in Sayville. So in a very brief way, how did you get from there, your little Long Island studio, to I'm now doing photography around the world in these multi-million-dollar weddings, and it's all gravy and it's allowing you to sit at home watching episodes of Catfish to your heart's content? Like, how did that 20-year span pan out for you?
Well, I think, stemming back to my genesis and my early career was I decided I wanted to be a photographer very early in life and went to school for it, which caveat, you do not have to go to school to be a photographer. I was not a big college advocate. And so I kind of got into my field right away, and I was freelancing for a bunch of studios, and I kind of just fell into wedding photography because I actually wanted to be a photojournalist. And therefore, as I was going to school, I was having opportunities that were still documenting people's lives, which were weddings, which were my career adjacent, or so I thought. Then I ended up freelancing for a ton of studios out on Long Island, in New York, and then just discovered that I was kind of being held back a lot by the studios I was working for. I was honestly being told things like, don't work as hard, don't shoot as good, don't give treatment like that to clients because now they're expecting it of us. And it got to the point where I said, like, this person is running a studio and they're not giving their all, and it's kind of just a number show. And I thought, I think all of this stems from, there's like an inner knowing inside of me that said, well, if that person can do it, I can surely do it. And so that kind of blossomed this idea that, well, clearly I'm doing something right. Clearly, maybe I'm doing something a little bit better or from a little bit different of an angle, because I'm attracting all of this attention. I'm attracting clients. I'm being asked for and spoken for by name from these studios. And I actually got handed a pretty rough deck one day in my life in 2011. Just was really rubbing together and just was getting a lot of friction with one particular studio owner that I had worked for several years. And then one day he kind of brutally fired me.
Gosh,
really unjustifiably. I was being
what's his name?
approached
Let's get him.
by I was being approached by event space managers and general
Mhm.
managers, and they were saying, we'd like to recommend you. And I was kind of funneling a lot of these things through my former studio boss, saying, are you okay if I do this? Like, I want to work more, I want to kind of branch out. And they would always say, yes, 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 go for it. Until one day there was just this explosion. I was fired through an email and was basically cut off from all communication, and that kind of ricocheted. And he had a bit of a name in the industry on Long Island, and that ricocheted to a few other studios that were his buddies. And ironically enough, that same day I was fired by his buddies as well,
Oh wow.
for no reason. And he was attempting to blackball me and basically spreading rumors that I was um, basically doing kind of corrupt things, and creative things to get recommended in these spaces. And I kind of took 48 hours, had a huge meltdown, pulled myself together, and said, how many events do I have on the book for myself personally? What do I need to survive financially? And I went from 2011 having 6 jobs on the books for myself, because the majority were for studios, to having 93
Jeez.
in 2012. And I went from a $24,000 W-2 to a over $250,000 income in 2012. So it
Nice.
was in a matter of a year that there was this kind of big jump. And then from there, I kind of climbed to the top of Long Island and realized that there was a huge glass ceiling financially. I was only able to charge a certain amount of money, because of the socioeconomic groups that I was in, and I was in on Long Island and the places that I was working at. And so I knew that I needed to get into Hampton's clientele. I knew I needed to get into New York City clientele because I wanted international clientele. So from there, I ventured into New York. My family thought I was crazy. I took on a business partner and went into New York. And that was kind of the beginning of the journey, because you have to go backwards a little bit to go forwards. And so or forward rather, but when you are a big fish in a little pond and then you go into a big pond, you turn into the little fish. So there were times the first year that I moved into the city that my pricing was lower when I was in New York in the first year than it had been in the last 5 years of my career. And it
Mm.
felt like I was regressing a little bit, but I knew I had to have what I did on Long Island and have that competitive edge financially. And then
Mhm.
once you have that competitive edge, you kind of break through that. And so the biggest game changer for me was honestly throwing myself into a bigger pond, because there was more that I could do. There were more people that I could reach. And sometimes people stay stuck and they don't grow because they truly have reached the maximum capacity of the fish tank that they're in. And
Mhm.
they need to challenge themselves to get outside of that. And so that was my biggest game changer, was actually taking my business from where it was to a bigger pond and kind
Mhm.
of letting myself grow.
So you got like, I guess, 2 points there. One where you're fired, and then you think, right, got to do something to first of all pay the bills, and then
Mm-hmm.
obviously then do something bigger after that. And then you're saying, I've hit this next ceiling and this next decision point. I've got to go again. Like that sounds like they're two risky moves.
Huge.
And
Yeah,
so, how much of you growing in your career has been about risk taking? And
all of it,
oh, I know the feeling.
all of it, all of it.
And then
It's one of my
how,
favorite quotes is with great risk comes great reward. And it's true.
yeah, and
It's
how,
so true.
if you can think back to those decisions, like how much did you agonize over that risk? Or are you someone who just says, you know what, I just got to do it. Let's just go, just pull the ripcord? Or do you
Hmm.
agonize over that decision and play out all of the different eventualities for months and then say, right, I got no other option. Let's just go do it.
No, I think I'm the type of person that says I have no other option. Let's just do it. I don't ever want to have any regrets in life. And I never ever want to look back on anything and say, I could have tried harder, or I could have done more, or I was too afraid to do this, or I was held back, or because life's going to keep happening. Like we're only getting older, we're only going to eventually die. So you might as well go for it. And I understand that I say that from a perspective of, someone that didn't have a family and didn't have kids and didn't have that type of weight around me, that I was a solo entity, that I could kind of float and do what I wanted. So I know that there are some people that are held back by that. But I think there are ways in which you can save up a nest egg.
Mhm.
And hopefully you could save up a nest egg. I know some situations are more difficult for people, but save up a 6 month nest egg somehow. Because the one thing that people don't realize, and I've converted a lot of my friends to entrepreneurs. A
Mm.
lot of them have worked for big corporate America, and just, international and corporate. And the one greatest thing that I tell them is that you're already doing everything you have to do for yourself. You're just doing it for somebody else. Like,
Mhm.
you already have the skill set of what it takes to run. Yeah, there's going to be a learning curve. Yeah, do you maybe need a better CPA? Like, yeah, do you maybe need to learn like about write-offs more and a little bit of the ins and outs of businesses and maybe some more paperwork? Yeah, sure. That's all there. That's all a learning curve. But the skill set that you have is already a skill set that you're probably most likely doing at your job.
Mhm.
And so what I try and convince all my friends to say is, especially ones that I feel like are working for corporate America, but then are kind of doing their thing on the side of the hobby. And I
Mhm.
always tell them, if you can just buy yourself enough finances for 1 month, if you could just cover your finances, and if that is not comfortable for you, then I say 2 months. But I'm walking through it with one of my friends right now that I'm like, you just need 30 days to coast, because you will be so surprised what you can just make happen in 30 days when you don't have to sector your brain off and give 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week to this job. You will be
Mhm.
so like shocked. It'll be like magic. Oh my gosh, you just will be shocked at what you can accomplish in a month. And so I
Mhm.
tell them all the time, just get 30 days. Just get 30 days. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, because people are afraid to do it, which I understand. So,
Mhm.
but a
Yeah,
lot can be accomplished in 30 days.
and it's quite similar to what essentially telling your friend in that specific example is a lot like the decision that I ended up making. So mine's slightly different is I just got incredibly bored of corporate life, and I really got to the end of my tether with the whole thing. And
Yeah.
at that point, like you say, in terms of I didn't have a partner, I didn't have kids, and I literally thought, like, if I make this leap now, the only person's life I'll mess up is my own. And then
Yep.
what's the worst that could happen? I'll go back to live with parents for a bit and then rebuild and go again. Right? It's not.
Yeah.
I have some form of safety net, even if it's not the greatest. There's something there, and I then in handing my notice in, I said, right, okay, I'll save up 6 months worth of income, right? And I've got 6 months to make it work, because I was trying to do that thing of build the side hustle whilst doing a full-time job. And then I had this kind of like thought process that was like, I'm not going to get a full-time wage with this part-time effort that I'm making. And it wasn't until I
Yeah.
cut the cord, and then you have like almost that fear of, if I don't make this
Yeah.
work, then I'm going back begging bowl in hand for my job back. And I don't want to do that. And that forced me to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have done if I was just saying, I've got this nice, comfortable job that pays me nice work and nice and well. And I've got this side thing, but okay, it's not growing as fast as I want, but it's okay. I've got a job here. Like that.
Yeah.
I had to have that like fear and risk in order to make things happen, which is kind of interesting, because that's not the advice I would give anybody, to say like, take this huge massive
Just
risk
do it.
everything, risk going
Yeah.
into debt, take faulting on your mortgage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that every person that I talk to who's kind of built a successful business has taken a lot of risks, but it's often not like the advice you give, because you don't want to be the one who said take this massive risk and it fails.
Yeah.
So like, but for you, like, and are you someone are you continuing to take risks, like try different things, or build a business in certain ways? I know you kind of got a little new venture on the way that's, I guess, a risk in and of itself, because it's something new, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I am taking a new risk, actually. Because I've been in my career for 20 years. My job, people will laugh and they'll say, oh, all you do is just click a button with your finger. And there's, at the level that I'm doing it, really at any level of doing this, especially with events, there's so much physical labor and manual
Mm-hmm.
labor involved. I mean, I have 35 pounds of gear hanging from me for 12 to 14 hours a day, and sometimes I have to do that 3, 4, 5 days in a row, depending on the scope of the job. And so my body is kind of tired as I'm getting
Yeah,
older.
yeah.
But I've always had the desire to be a public speaker. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm actually on the journey now where I'm starting to build and going to go after it. I've gotten great feedback over it. And I think 20 years of seeing people and reflecting them back to themselves has kind of proven and given me a lot of insight on the core of humanity, and how to relate to them and how to pull the best out of them, because that's what I've been doing. Oftentimes I walk into a room and I have to assess it within seconds and know how to make people feel comfortable and calm and their most authentic self. And so a lot of that is really applicable to real life and how we relate to people and how we walk through life. So I am starting a new venture, and that is taking away from the photography aspect of it. But again, great risk comes great reward. And I'm a big believer of following your gut and your intuition. And luckily for me, my intuition has never steered me wrong. And I've always kind of seen my life like a little bit of a treasure map where I don't have all of the pieces, but as long as I keep walking, the next dots appear. Like as soon as I get to the one island, then I'm like, oh, here's the dots to go. I don't know what the next island looks like, but I know this is the direction I have to go. So no, I don't think that journey ever stops. And it's not out of a craving for more. I want more. I want better. It's listening to what you need. It's listening to what your body needs. It's I wouldn't say it's necessarily I know there's a lot of, it's so funny because positivity messages now could be really toxic, and they could actually suppress you, or they could drain you. And so I'm thinking in my head everything I'm saying that could potentially be taken out of context. But I think wanting more for yourself, we've dampened that a lot. And again, it's not out of a need of I need more because I'm never satisfied. It's actually calling to your greater self and challenging yourself, because you're really the only person that's going to challenge you at the end of the day. Because somebody come to you and say, you could do more, you could want more, and then you just don't do it because you're like, it doesn't resonate within me. But you're really your sole motivator. You're your biggest cheerleader. And so when I feel that inside of me that it's time to go another direction, or it's time to pursue something else, I kind of do it and just see where it takes me. And it's always worked out, fortunately.
And I got a bunch of questions based off what you just said. But the first one that kind of like springs to mind is obviously like if you're doing these weddings, which are for high net worth individuals and people in the public eye, so on and so forth, and they're not paying you an insignificant amount of money to do those weddings, right? So
yeah.
You could say that if you're deciding to branch out and do more public speaking, then you're not doing that because of money. Because if you wanted money, you do more weddings because you've already got the name in that field, and you're already, just could open up your books a little bit more and take on some more clients, and all would be well, and you'd climb up that financial ladder even further. So what is it? Do you feel that like maybe it was a money thing that maybe sort of drove you in the initial stages to kind of like build a business, but now what's your kind of like key motivator? What do you use to measure success if you're not constantly just chasing as much money as possible?
Well, I think that this is, I think this is what a lot of people come to terms with when they hit the pinnacle of what they deem successful, and then they arrive there and it doesn't fulfill them the way they thought it would. And I think for the better part of my career, because most people don't know, and unless you're in the industry, you don't know, but the pinnacle of my career, the Grammy, the Oscar, the Emmy of my industry is to be on the list of Harper's Bazaar top photographers, top videographers, top designers, top producers in the world. It's a very small, intimate, prestigious list internationally. And I hit that list in 2020 in my 17th or 16th year of business. And I remember when I got the call and I found out I was on that list, which is essentially the list that the gatekeepers to these very affluent, ultra high net worth celebrity events pick and choose. It's very rare that you work with that type of event and not be on these lists. And I remember when I got the call, I thought I'd be elated, and I was so proud. But I remember my stomach went, now what? Like this, now what do I do? I have this thing, this pinnacle, this Emmy, this Grammy, this everything, this thing that's gonna, but I'm like, this doesn't change how hard I've worked. This doesn't change my talent level. This doesn't change everything I've done to get here. And yet this settling feeling didn't come on me. It was this very anticlimactic, I'm so grateful, and it's such an accomplishment and the biggest accolade for my career. But it didn't fulfill me. It fell flat. And it kind of led to a little bit of a downward spiral for me mentally, that I was like, ooh, I really got to reassess some things. And then the more I thought about it, the more I went back to my roots and realized why I became a photographer. And it started when I was doing a lot of humanitarian work in impoverished countries. And I remember I fell in love with being able to document someone's truth, and to let them know that I saw them and that they were seen and that they weren't insignificant. And that's really why I got into photography, is because I wanted people to feel seen and understood. And so going back to the root of that, once I hit the pinnacle and being in this like ultra luxe glam world and staying in places I don't think I'll ever be able to afford in my life for work, um, really kind of knocked me down. And I just kind of said, this is so great. And you've achieved a work-life balance that people could only dream of, but you're still not fulfilled. And it's because we all need a purpose. And I think my purpose is to help people uncover their truths and live authentically. And so that's why I decided to go down the path that I'm going down to now.
Awesome. And obviously, you've mentioned you've had a 20-year career thus far, and counting, because you've not stopped doing photography by
No,
any stretch of the
yeah,
imagination. So it's 20 years and
still shooting.
counting.
Hmm.
Exactly. And so I would imagine we've spoken about a couple of the down moments that you've had, and a few of the ups as well. But specifically, like for people listening who potentially aren't where they want to be it financially or status wise within their industry or whatever, how or how should I put this? Like, what personality traits, what characteristics do you feel have got you through those kind of like dips where you feel like, whether you're in a slump of motivation or, things aren't going your way, like what do you feel like are the things that have enabled you to keep on going in that field?
I think that entrepreneurship is not for the weak of heart or not for the faint of heart. And I think that a lot of what has kept me going is my grit and my
Hmm.
scrappiness, and honestly, just sheer determination. I am a fighter. I love a challenge. And I think a big part of my success is because early on in my career, I was told, you can't do that. You'll never accomplish that. And so I have really developed a strong resistance to that. And now my response to is when people say you can't do that, which no one really says that anymore, but in my early career, I just basically said, watch me. And so now I've taken other people's kind of ill wishes, be it for their own blocks of immaturity or insecurity. And when they say you can't do that, I've just said, watch me. And so it's been a sheer determination, of a challenge. And it kind of was my motivating force. And when I feel like I'm down, or I'm a thinker and I'm a true creative through it, there's sometimes I feel a little bit like a divergent, because I'm a true creative, but then I also am a right and left brainer, like fully at the same time, always, which feels a little chaotic, anxiety sometimes, but it's
Sure.
worked. But I think the one thing that is probably the biggest deterrent for most people is that they conform, and they conform to everyone around them. And I think conformity is killing creativity. Conformity is killing authenticity. Conformity is killing your business. Because I think people are using everybody else's past successes as their future goal points.
Hmm.
And that's already been done. That's already been there. So if you're chasing what someone's already done, you're already behind the eight ball. So people have to take their eyes off of everyone else. And it could sound so cliche and it could sound so cheesy, but it is so true that you are your greatest superpower. I have done things because it's been authentic to me in my business, of which people have tried to emulate. And
Hmm.
it's felt really gooky and really gross, because I'm
Sure.
like, oh, that's a little cringe, because it's not who you are. And
Hmm.
people see through that. And so I would just say for people who are kind of struggling that, what you don't know is that your uniqueness and your quirks and the way you approach things. And I was told for a better part of this new venture of my career that I wasn't as polished as I needed to be. And granted, there was some truth in that. But I think at the end of the day, when I look back at all of kind of the moments that Anee Atelier, my company, rose to the top, was because I was being me. I was
Hmm.
being kind of this, yes, polished, but slightly unpolished, little New York Italian. And I think people found it endearing, and it was super authentic to me. And so I think people really need to go back to that and grab onto who they are and infuse that into their business, rather than looking at, I know you work with a lot of fitness people, like, oh, so and so's doing this and so's doing TikTok and so's doing, and it's like, bro, just like get off everyone else and like get on yourself, because you're your biggest advocate, you're your biggest sell point, because no one is you and no one can be you. So you better work that angle, because that's what's working for you.
For sure. And what you said is like reminds me of this. I'm watching the like a masterclass series by this Harlan Coben, who's like a New York Times bestselling like author of like thrillers and stuff like that. He's done a few Netflix stuff, and he says a couple of things in there which are like kind of allude to what you were basically saying. So he was saying like when you're coming up with an idea for your novel, you're trying to write something that's going to appeal or it's going to be interesting, is that what often people do is they say, oh, okay, well, medical thrillers are really big right now, so let's go write a
Mhm.
medical thriller. And then you realize it takes a year to 18 months to write the novel and get it published, by which time that
Yeah.
trend has disappeared, or everybody else has already done it before you and now it just
Yeah.
sounds a little bit washed out. So, you know, following like what you think is going to be successful probably is never gonna work, or it's only ever going to work for a short time. And then the other thing that he said, again, like alludes to what you were saying, is that he says he's this type of person who I think he quoted some other guy, but I can't remember his name. But he said he's the type of guy who, if he's swinging through the jungle, he will take hold of one vine, let go, and then grab the next one. He doesn't have to have hold of two for security. And that's a little
Yeah.
bit like you with your taking risks. It's like, right, okay, ditch that one and let's get on to the next one and see where that takes me, and let's figure out stuff from there. And I think I again, like a lot of the people that I talk to, especially if they're not necessarily where they want to be, they always seem to be people who want to have things like mapped out. Like this is
Mm.
every single step that I'm going to take along the way. And like I've never had that roadmap. I just kind of just a little bit like you, just kind of take one step, see what happens, then go to the next one and see what happens after that. So I think that whole thing of taking a few risks and kind of just putting yourself out there is really, really important.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of want to switch to a little bit of social media stuff and some of your kind of like thinking around that. John, you just touched on it a little bit there. Um, Obviously, I would imagine that you don't actually, in the photography business at least, use social media to get clients, right? That's because that's through, I
You
would
know,
imagine, some sort of connections and networking. So how and what do you use social media for?
so I have had kind of a really strong love-hate relationship with social media, as I'm sure most people do. When kind of Meta took over and it really turned into pay to play, a lot of the organic reach was pretty much squelched. I know people who have massive followings. I certainly don't have a massive following. But you're just not being seen by your followers. You're really being blocked a lot. And so for me, social media is, yes, is it fun to, maybe have something go viral or watch likes? And we've become such slaves to the like button. We have become such slaves to, outside affirmation that it's literally killing us. And so um, my my approach to social media is that we're not probably, we are on the precipice of going through a really big anti-social media movement. And I've been saying that for the last 2 years, and it's actually really interesting because Mark Groves, who is like a very well-known speaker, author, thought leader, he just announced that he was deleting his Instagram, and he is only he's calling it the great delete, I think is what he's calling it. And
Mhm.
I just said, I knew it. Here we go. Like, because it is we have gotten so used to these short form blurps that we put out. And it
Mhm.
really is not an indicator of what someone is capable of or their talent level. And unfortunately, what social media has done is made the professionals and the amateurs appear on the same level. Sometimes the amateurs might appear
Mhm.
greater than the professionals. And unfortunately, people don't know until in my industry, they don't know until the proof. They don't know until they get the tangibles of, oh my gosh, this is so bad, but their social looked so great.
Mhm.
And so for me, do I get inquiries off social? Yeah, sometimes. But have I had one of my biggest leads come off social? Yeah, like to me, that was a total fluke, and it was one of the biggest jobs of my career. Um, but I wouldn't stake your claim on social media because
Mhm.
you're always going to be chasing your chat tail. You're always going to be trying to figure out the algorithm. And to me, figuring out the algorithm is like in America trying to figure out how to get a good credit score. Like it is like the great mystery, the great unknown. Like, so you're telling me if I pay my monthly bills off in full, that it's going to be better for my credit score if I pay every month and pay interest. Like that's what you're telling me is going to give me a better credit score rather than saying, hey, I charge up this debt and I wipe it out every 30 days. For me, it's kind of like the algorithm can say, well, the algorithm really likes reels right now, and they really like videos, or they really like when you hashtag, or they really like when you, and I'm kind of like, they're making up the rules as they go. So for
Sure.
me, I don't put a lot of claim in social media. It doesn't work for me. I don't know a lot of people unless you're an influencer or a celebrity or social media something, and even they don't really grasp their full audience. I kind of feel like people are chasing their tails a bit with social media, and I say that tiptoeing around
Don't tiptoe.
around what you do, because
No, no, no.
it's kind of me saying like, I think it has, I think it's social validity.
Hmm.
um and if you can separate that from yourself, because I think a lot of people are now conjoining, it's a slippery slope, because you're now equating a lot of your self validation to how
Hmm.
people respond to you on social, and how they respond to you on social is not an indicator of your success or your self validation. It's a formulaic algorithm.
Mm.
um, and so that's, to me, the danger is when people tie up their success into social media. And I'm saying, don't do that. Like, if you want to use it and it's a tool, great. I use it.
Hmm.
I post like once a month, but I use it, but use it only for as a tool, and not as a barometer tool for your success of your
Sure.
business or what you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no need to tiptoe around, because I 100% agree with everything that you've just said. So even though I would say, bill myself as a social media marketer, I view social media like email or
Mm-hmm.
a website,
Yes,
or it's
it's a tool.
a tool to run my business, and it sits in an ecosystem of everything else that I do. If Instagram disappeared tomorrow, I'd have another way of getting clients. It's
Same.
not the be all and end all of everything. And certainly, like, my approach to social media is, I don't care about views, likes, reach. I literally don't look at it at all.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I really measure is, I was talking to a client about this, and I kind of measure it on a bit more of a macro level rather than an individual post level. I don't care if this post got 10 likes and this one got 100 and that one got 1,000. I look at it on a month and say, of all the content I posted, did my email list grow? Did I get more leads?
Mm-hmm.
Did I make more sales? Did the business grow? Yes, cool,
Yeah.
fine. Let's move on to next month and post some more content. I'm not there sitting on every individual post going, oh, that one got 1,000, but that one got 100,000. So, oof, that
A
one was
lot of people
terrible. It's
do.
you just end up, like you say, you just chase your tail the whole time. So what I do
Mm-hmm.
is, I just have one simple kind of thought and say, what's the most interesting to me, valuable thing to my audience that I can say on social media today? And let's just say
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens. And if
Yeah.
it starts to go all the wrong way over a course of a month, I go, perhaps I should change something. But at the moment, it's doing all right. So we just leave it alone and
Sure.
keep going.
I think if people can view social media as the long game rather than the immediate short-term game, we would be a lot better off, because again, it's like you're saying, you're taking the 30-day spread as opposed to obsessing over, oh my gosh, this only got 20 likes, or oh my gosh, why did this get 500, or why did that go viral, or it's
Yeah.
just, it depends on the day. It depends
Yeah,
on, where Saturn's sitting in the sky. Like, it just depends on a
exactly.
lot of things that you can't control. So,
And there's like so many people out there who, think they have like the secret sauce. Like, if you do this and then that. It's just like,
mhm,
it's just a little bit of potluck, or
yeah.
it's either potluck, or you drift down the route of basically tricking people into views, which is like, okay, this post is now 5/10 of a second long, and you're going to instantly watch it, and then I'm going to get a ton of views, which
Right.
is how most of the content is made. And I think, like, a lot of people don't realize is, if you actually look at how Instagram defines a view, it's 1 millisecond of watch time.
No, I
Now,
didn't know that.
I looked at what a millisecond actually is, and like a blink of an eye is like 100 milliseconds. So it's like,
Yeah.
so it's 100 times faster than a blink of an eye. That's what's classed as a view. So someone who says
That's
like,
insane.
oh, I got 100,000 views on that video, that could just be 100,000 people just
A
scrolling
blink.
past your video.
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't actually mean that anyone sat there and watched it. Um,
That's
so
insane.
again, like, this obsession with all these metrics, which essentially feed the meta machine that they want,
Yeah.
like more views, more eyes, more advertising and stuff like that probably mean nothing for your business unless, like you said, like I said, is like on a monthly level, is the revenue going up?
It's it's not, it's self-validation. It's always going to come down to self-validation. It's if it translates into financial gains, that's amazing. And like I said, I have gotten some business off Instagram, or I have gotten people. Um, but really what it's there for is self-validation, and it makes you feel good. And
Mm,
that's the end of that. Which
exactly.
is why I think people are going to start to wake up, and they are starting to wake up to saying, wow, this is crazy. Like,
Mm,
why am I obsessing over this? This is insane. I have a successful business. I have for X amount of years, and I make X amount of money. Like, do I really care if, like, the meta universe gives
mm,
me likes, or if I have,
mm.
hundreds of thousands of views? Like, yes, exposure is always great. It's amazing. Um, but if it disappeared tomorrow, I don't think a lot of people's careers would fall apart unless you work for Meta, and then you might
Yeah.
have to find a new job. But other than that, I don't think it's an indicator of success at all.
Sure. And so like you mentioned like short form content, and that's kind of like the way things are going. And you also mentioned like a very valid point about like the amateur and the expert kind of like
Mhm.
simmering at the same level. And there's a book that I read a while back called The Death of Expertise, which is quite an
Mm,
interesting read, which talks about basically uh talks about more a lot more in terms of maybe like medicine and stuff like that, but where people who are an experts are now like people don't trust experts, but they will trust
yeah,
the person with the huge following on social media, which sounds nuts. Like it would be the same as like you doing weddings for 20 years and then the influencer who just somehow got themselves 100,000 followers is now considered the expert versus someone who's done it for 20 years. It's like absolutely crazy. Where do you sit on kind of like the quality versus get something out there? Because if someone looked at your
oh
say the Anee Atelier thing, obviously you're selling essentially, whether you get leads from there or not, is you're selling that image, that brand of a very high quality photographic experience that they have. So every post you make, I would assume in your mind has to have that visual aesthetic to it, has to have quality to it.
yeah,
But for the average
consistency.
but for the average person who
Mhm.
isn't a high class photographer like me, I mean, I, I could dabble. I could
You're
give you
not
a
so
few
bad.
tips.
I saw what you could do with an iPhone a couple of weeks ago. So
Yeah. Um, how much do you think there's a swing not just from like short form, but from this like let's just pump out as much content as possible
yeah.
to is there going to be do you think a need for more quality of content in the future?
Yeah, I think that we went through this whole movement of like, if it's good enough, just get it out there. And that is not something that was ever bred in me. That's not in my DNA. It doesn't mean that it has to be perfect and the best anyone's ever seen. No, but it has to be my best.
Hmm.
Like, if I'm going to put something out there, it has to be my personal best. I have to hit the top of, hey, could this be better? Could I execute this better? Could I have said this better? And so there is something to be said for excellence, and always working with excellence, and always putting excellence out there. I think there's a whole lot of noise. I think there's a whole hell of a lot of mediocre out there. And it's real hard to get through that sludge and that grime. But once you see something that's excellent, you kind of can't unsee it. It's just the way it is. And so I think when we went through this culture of just get it out there, just put it out there, just whatever, all that's doing is devaluing your brand.
Hmm.
Even when I see like luxury, I don't know if it was Ferrari, but I saw this on a social media post somewhere. I think it was Ferrari. But when asked and said, how come you don't make commercials? And Ferrari, just the CEO, just said, because the people who are watching TV aren't my clientele. Like,
Hmm.
it is having conviction about the way you do something and doing it with excellence. But I think that, how do I want to say this? Again, I think that we can operate in good enough for so long before that starts to deteriorate and unravel. And I think as a society, with social media and just pumping stuff out, we have executed in good enough and good enough and good enough that our threshold now has been lowered, that we're like, well, if I just hit this, then that's great. And we're no longer pushing ourselves. Do I think that you should, you know, toss and turn at night for 5 years before you ever get something out there? No. But I think that internally, your internal self and your intuition and your gut should know this is the best I can produce at this level. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean to say that I cannot produce better a year from now, but this is the best for where I'm at now. So let me put my best out there. Listen, people are pumping stuff out all the time. It's not hard to be an influencer. It's not, is it hard to be a successful influencer? Yes. Is it hard to be a photographer? No. Is it hard to be a business coach? Is it hard to say, I can do this in marketing? Is it hard to be, you know, I see so many people that want to be social media managers. Is it hard to say that you can do that? No. But is it hard to be successful at it? Yes. And I think that excellence is what separates the person who just is fine with good enough and the person who wants to be great.
Mm.
And for me, um, you know, I think it was Benjamin Franklin is just one of my favorite quotes that says, I gave up something good to go for something great. And I don't think you could ever go wrong with that mentality. So I am super anti good enough. I'm just do great for where you're at.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I was thinking like when I create my content, it's like part of my, I guess my brand is that I try to do things as low effort as possible. But low effort doesn't necessarily mean low quality. And some people get like that twisted is that, okay, well, I I want to spend the minimum amount of time doing marketing on
Mm-hmm.
social media. Like one of the things that I use in my marketing is I basically say that I spend less than 10 minutes a day on social media. And that's true,
Mm-hmm.
unless for
Yeah.
personal reasons I want to go and surf around or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just want to make the best possible piece of content I can do on that day. That might literally just be 2 sentences that I put
Yeah.
onto a post or something like that. Or it might be a short video or whatever. And I'm not the best video editor. I'm not the best photographer. I'm not the best copywriter. But what I like I you say is that I try to do the best for what I have within my
Mm-hmm.
skill set and put that out there. Um, but having said that, I know there's a ton of people who message me in DMs or clients and people that join my community and stuff like that. Is they're really fearful of, well, basically two things. One is that they, what they're doing is just, even if it's their best, it's just not good enough for
Mm-hmm.
social media and like
Yeah.
and getting they can't get over that barrier. Like I can't
Yeah.
design anything, this looks terrible. I can't take photos, this looks terrible. I can't write and this reads terribly. And so they get like stuck at that point. So what would you say to someone who is at that point, who feels like their best isn't good enough compared to what they're seeing everybody else do on social media?
I mean, I think that's super subjective, but that's going to come down to, are you saying that, like, what is your actual objective? Are you saying, I want to be an author and I want to be a writer, but my writing's not good? Then there's a part of me that's kind of like, well, we gotta turn the mirror back a little bit and say, maybe I know you want to be an author, but maybe if you can't elevate that skill, if you can't teach yourself, if you can't learn to be better, maybe we should reevaluate what you're doing. If you're telling me this person is a fitness instructor and they're not very good with design, that to me is not an indicator of, well, maybe you shouldn't be a fitness instructor, but that's an indicator of, like, maybe you need to outsource that, like maybe you need to bring in some help. And um, again, we're talking about finances and how much you have to invest. And um, to me, honestly, if I feel like I wasn't hitting the threshold with social media and I did not have the resources, because I always think about that. It's so easy for a thought leader or for someone to say, well, just outsource it. And people are like, I don't have the money to outsource it. Like, I am a startup business. I don't have those resources yet. Like, I am everything. I am the captain. I wear all the hats. Like, and sometimes I'm not really good at being the first mate, or sometimes I'm not really good at being the plumber, or sometimes I don't know like how the electric circuit box works. And yet I don't have the finances to invest into someone to wear that hat for me. My best thing is networking. Like, take that energy that you're like, I'm not good at the social media thing, I'm not good at the design thing, and forget social media. Take some money, take out another trainer, go for drinks, pick someone's brain, use that time more productively. So if you feel like I'm not good at design, I'm not good with words, and yours, again, we're kind of going back to like people are so stuck on the social media game that we're like, we lost sight. Like we just have completely lost sight of old school, what makes it work. And what made it work was not my social media game. What made it work was getting out and actually creating relationships with people. So if people feel stuck in one area, then redirect that attention someplace else that's actually going to generate revenue for you, because people get lost in the sauce and they just hang out in the weeds and they're like, well, I just can't do the social media. Stop doing the social media thing. Get outside, take someone to like a bar, take someone to dinner, go to a networking event, and like go old school, go grassroots, like, because
Mm.
social media is not the end all be all for a lot of career choices.
Yeah, and I think like one of the previous mentors I had, he kind of said something along the lines of dominate your own postcode or zip code before you try and dominate the world. And that was him saying, yeah, like before you try and go and, get clients in Brazil, Bahamas,
Mm-hmm.
and wherever, try and get some
Yeah,
people from your own town to invest in whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah, actually go talk to some people and see if,
yeah,
you know, what you're selling is what they want, and you get to kind of like know. And I think like some of the best ideas or the motivation and things like that I've had come from in-person conversations. Like I'm a
yeah,
little bit of an introvert, so lots of networking events are like that's like my kryptonite. I don't want to do that.
yeah,
But even like podcasts like this or just talking to someone in person kind of just reignites a little bit of fire or something like that, or sparks a few ideas, and then that can kind of get me off
yeah,
and doing stuff. And I think what you say about taking some money investing is a really important one. And again, we talked about risk earlier. I always think back to every time I kind of like have taken a significant jump, it was not just a risk, it was a financial risk at the same time. Like I worked with a mentor back in 2020, like literally before the pandemic hit.
mm,
And I gave him money that I couldn't afford. Like he was very expensive and I couldn't afford it.
yeah,
But I thought, right, this is it. This is like chips are all in at this point. And luckily, he was good at what he did. And then, everything kind of went on from there. But that financial risk or just thinking a little bit differently, like I don't have to keep banging my head against social media to make some progress. Maybe it's like what I tell my clients, like, for example, I really think, and I think we talked before, like we were messaging back and forth about the podcast before we jumped on. Like long form is,
yeah,
and like articles, podcasts, all these sorts of things. These are such underutilized tools now, because I can't remember for the life of me, I remember which client it was, but they were talking to me about a client or a new sale that they made and stuff like that. So where did they come from? Oh, it's from that article I wrote. Right. Okay. So people still Google stuff. That still happens. And then,
yeah,
but there's such a like deficit of good quality content out there in a long form thing, that like people just forget that that's actually a thing that people do. Like, I don't know anybody who goes on Instagram and like asks it a Google style question to find an answer. People still go to Google or YouTube to find those things. But if you kind of just put a big cap on your content and it's just these quick buzzword laden 15-second videos, you're probably just shooting yourself in the foot from the get go. So I think,
yeah. But that goes back to conformity. That goes back to being a follower and not a leader. Because again, you are looking at people's past successes, and so what social media is doing, and what all that kind of marketing advertisement space is doing, is showing you that, yeah, to be rewarded, you have to put this out, you have to put that out, but it's not doing anything for anybody. And so we have to take our eyes off of what everybody else is doing, and you have to listen to yourself, and you have to do something different, which would be go back to long form instead of the short term, because you're just circling, you're chasing your tail.
mhm,
But it's always usually going to come back to, again, conformity, and to kind of rage against the machine and to not
mhm,
conform. But again, everything we're talking about is this. It's literally people going, well, the buzzwords and the this and the that, and I'm kind of like, forget the buzzwords. Like, I don't really care what Joe and like Bob are doing over here? Is anyone even really named Bob anymore? But that's when I say stuff like that, I like realize I'm like, oh my God,
Well,
you're
Bob's short
that's
for
how you
Robert,
are.
so there's lots of Roberts
Yeah,
out there.
there are. There's one very special Robert in all of our lives, right, Simon?
There you go.
Um,
People listening go,
so
what the hell does that mean?
they're gonna go, what? It's
She's talking
my
about
mother's
Bobby
boyfriend.
Kennedy.
Right. Who are they voting for? Independent? Um, but again, I think that is like the number one, and I say it all the time, conformity is a killer. It's just a killer of everything because you are now basing your success off of what somebody else is doing. Don't do that. Like base your success off of yourself, base your success off of what you think. Like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? You're gonna divert a little bit and you're gonna take a detour, and then, oh my God, something's actually gonna work, like, and you're gonna be a trendsetter, or
Mhm.
it doesn't work, but to be honest, what you're doing wasn't working either. So
For
again,
sure.
like, risk will reward. Like, you might as well try and stop the endless, revolving around what everyone else is doing, and kind of break free and try to find something new and something that's you and unique. But the conformity is a bitch.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. I mean, I personally, again, like I use like different analogies for my thought process. So long before I was I started my own business. I listened to a lot of heavy metal music, right? People who follow me on social media will know that. And
Yeah.
the analogy that I use there is the bands that I know, and I'm sure you could apply this to any music genre as well, but there are bands that have been around for decades that have not necessarily, just done the same record every single time, but they kind of do the same thing every single time. They just stick to their thing. And then regardless of where the trends go up and down, and this type of music's hot, that one's not, and they just do their own thing. And they say, like, this is the music I want to make. And that stands the test of time. Whereas all these trends, like the people who were popular in 2001 and now they've disappeared and stuff like that. Whereas there's bands out there that have lasted and lasted and lasted because they don't care about what everybody else is doing. They don't care about what's hot, what's not, and who's liking me on social media. They just create what they want to create. They create what is they're like their truth, their integral thing that they want to
Yeah.
communicate to the world, and they just go make it. And I think that philosophy or that like approach, if people did more of that in their business, then they get more successful. And like the way that I do that on social media, which everyone else can do if they want to do, just don't do it to my account, is I just mute everybody on social media. Everybody I follow, I mute, except for family and friends who are not associated with my business, because I
Mm.
just don't want to see any content. I literally have
You want to be influenced.
I've got no desire to see what the next business coach is doing, even if they're a friend of mine. No, I'll watch their personal content on their personal page, but I'll support them by following them. But I don't want to see their content. I don't care.
Yeah.
So just shut everybody out. Otherwise, you just have these stream of stuff coming at your face, which is kind of
Noise.
like, oh, that's better. They put it better than I did, or oh yeah, their videos are edited way better than they got nicer captions than I have, so I can't put my video out. I just go throw it out there, and I just, not that I don't care, but I don't care what other people do or anything like that. So I
Well,
guess there's a subtle difference.
it's the same thing. It's conformity, it's comparison. They're both killers. Like, comparison is another huge one that's like, well, so and so's doing this and so and so's doing that, and God, mine sucks, and mine. And it's cool to look at people's stuff to challenge yourself, but the second that you use it and it's weaponized against you, and you start
Mm-hmm.
doubting your ability and you start doubting yourself, I'm not a really big fan of labeling things like imposter syndrome, because I think that that's just a way that enables a thought or a behavior when we actually label it and name it. I know I'll probably get slack for that, but I don't really believe in imposter syndrome. I think it's a made up thing. I think we all feel like we can get better. I think when we compare ourselves to the greats, when I compare myself to Annie Leibovitz, like, yeah, I'm gonna be like, wow, there's a part of me that's like, I could probably do that. But but
Screw
but
that.
also, like, right, Annie, if you're listening, but also like recognizing, like, she's a great, like,
Mm-hmm.
she's one of the greats, like, and she deserves to be. But I think the second that I were to turn around and say, oh, I don't think I'll ever be like Annie. I don't think that I'll ever I'll ever have the skill set. I don't think I'll ever have the success. And the second you label it, like you give it power over you. And so we're all going to feel at some point in time like we're not good enough, especially, going into the public speaking world. Of course, I have some close friends who are just incredibly successful speakers, and they have this, 20, 30-year career. And I look at them and I'm like, ugh, like sometimes I don't want to
Mhm.
ask them for advice because I'm like, oh God, like I don't want to ask them about this because they're so successful. But that doesn't mean that I have imposter syndrome. It just means I have room to grow. It just means
Mhm.
I have room to get better. But comparison, conformity, it's just such a burnout. It's all going to burn you out. Again, you're just going to be spinning your wheels and obsessing over it.
For sure. Cool. So I've got one last question,
Mhm.
which I was out in Long Island a month or so ago, whenever it was. Um, and we had a little bit of a discussion about AI, and you were showing me some cool little AI tricks you can do with photography and stuff like that. And we had the discussion that basically, from a wedding photography point of view, AI is a long way from, deposing you as
Mhm.
a career,
Very long.
because someone's still got to show up and point the camera, right?
Mhm.
There's AI has not solved that one just yet. But looking at the broader picture across maybe different industries, maybe you've got friends in different industries and stuff like that. Do you see AI as a threat to entrepreneurs? Do you see it as a good thing that's going to help enhance certain things? Do you see it as a bad thing that's going to dupe people and kind of the scammers are going to run riot? Like, where do you stand on the whole AI thing that's happening?
I think it's going to be the best and the worst thing that's ever happened to us. I think that it is going to help professionals like me ease their workload a little bit. But my whole philosophy is that I think you have to start with a great base and a great foundation and enhance it from there. It's how I view my post production. It's how I view enhancing people's appearances, enhancing a photo. You have to start out with a great composition and just slightly tweak to make it even brighter. With AI, yeah, it's great. Sometimes if I get stuck on the way I'm wording a sentence or the way I'm writing something, I'll pop it in. But AI right now is only as great as what you feed into it.
Hmm.
So if I feed an incredible image, or if I feed an incredible theory or an incredible paragraph, and I want to zhuzh it a little, or maybe there's something I'm not thinking of because I'm just stuck in it. AI is an incredible tool to enhance that. But I think right now, if someone, I heard of people are like writing books with it, and they're and I think it's brilliant. I think AI is brilliant. I think be a completely it's going to be a complete revolution in the medical field and the medical industry. I think that the speed at which a computer thinks is going to always outperform a human for sure. But I think right now where we sit, we all kind of want to approach it saying, let me feed an excellent something into
Hmm.
this so it enhances it. But I absolutely think it's going to be another next wave of uh, people that are underqualified, that are, you know, making themselves appear a bit more shiny than they actually are, or appear to have a bit more knowledge than they
Hmm.
actually do. So I think with the growth of technology, that's always going to come. I
Yeah.
think people just have to get a little more savvy, and it just depends on where the human connection flows. If we continue to kind of moving away from human connection and we go more digital, I think it's going to be harder and harder for upcoming generations to discern between what is authentic and what feels right and true versus maybe what's a little bit more mechanical, a little more transactional. So I think we have to just kind of move with stealth and just be observant and kind of keep our eyes open. But I think it is going to be the best and potentially the worst thing that's ever happened to us.
For sure. I think you're right. And like my business partner on my AI business, he kind of says to me that AI is not going to take anyone's job as it is right now, but someone who knows how to use AI will. And
Completely.
that's like the difference. If I, in my world, say, for example, someone who writes copy for a website, so sales copy or email copy or anything like that, AI way, way, way behind a good copywriter. It's just not even comparable. But a great copywriter with AI is going to be
Right.
a bit more of a force, because it's going to take away a lot of that grunt work, but they're still going to have that creative flair that AI currently can't replicate. So I think, like you say, there's like that balancing act between, I still need to know my stuff, I still need to be
Yes.
good at this thing, and then the AI is going to help me just shape and refine that whole thing a little bit more. And I guess coming back to one of the other points that you made about non-conformity is AI knows what people have fed it. They don't know
Exactly.
something that someone has just thought of in their head. Like I'm writing in a newsletter right now for my audience. AI doesn't know anything that I've just said in there. It's all new thought that's been sitting and milling around in my brain. And I could use then AI to say, well, help me refine this. I probably won't, but I could. But if I asked AI to write this newsletter, it would be terrible, and it would be poles apart from what I actually wanted to say. So it's that whole thing of striking that balance. I think you're
Yeah,
totally
you have to still infuse your humanity into artificial intelligence. And again, it's starting with knowledge, it's starting with an excellent product, it's starting with a standard. So an excellent copywriter is going to feed excellent directives to AI, which is then going to produce even more excellent results. Whereas someone who's not a copywriter that kind of just says, write this for me, enter. It's going to be a very generic, lackluster. There's going to be no vibrance, no color to it. It's going to just fall flat. So I think right now the people, it could make a pretty wide gap. I mean, I think when I see generated AI images, they're pretty good, but there's still you can still tell that they're AI. There's still things in there. I think the more I think about like going to college now and thinking, oh my gosh, like you could literally just tell ChatGPT to like write you like a dissertation,
yeah.
like write a paper for you, right? It's so insane to me. But I think that the flair of humanity and the color of who you are as a person infused with AI could be just a recipe for success.
Yeah, and I think the shortcut might get you so far, but
Yeah,
it's not gonna, you're not gonna set yourself apart from everybody else by always taking the shortcut, the easy road. Got to take that
yeah.
risk. Um,
I think once we get to the iRobot stage of AI, I think then we could have like a real deep discussion about it. But I don't think we're there yet.
yeah,
Well, we're not there yet, but we'll see where we are in 20 years. Could be
I'll be
light years ahead.
retired by then. So it won't matter to me. I'll have my AI robot bringing me snacks. That'll be
Right,
fine
right.
for me.
You're like Simon 2.0. Can you come over
Yeah,
now?
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Jetsons.
Cool. So thank you very much for your time, Gina. So before we disappear, though, if people want to find out more about you and keep up to date with the things that you're doing, and maybe they've got a few $100,000 lying around that they want to throw at a wedding photographer, how do they find out more about you, what you do, and kind of keep tabs with everything that you're doing in the future?
Sure, sure. So social and URL website is all the same. It'd be www.aneeatelier.com or at Anee Atelier on social. I'm not sure if I should spell Anee Atelier
I'll
for
put a
people,
link in the show notes.
but
I was already
it's a lot of vowels. It's a lot of vowels. And moving forward, for the future tense, moving forward, my speaking Instagram handle is at Gina Esposito, and my website would be ginaesposito.com, which will be going live at the beginning of June 2024.
Perfect, perfect. Anee Atelier is French. It's difficult to spell, right? Is it French? Is it French? Atelier? It's got to be French, right?
Yeah, atelier is yeah, it's a word for, it means create a creative studio.
Ah, there you go. Every day
Yeah,
is a school day. Cool.
every day.
Thanks very much for your time, Gina. Have
No
a
worries.
great rest of your day. I'll speak to you soon.
You too.